you wouldn't tell your story to a skeptical coworker in the same way with somebody who's in your small group. And the reason being is because they're in different stages of life. They will hear different things from each and every one of our stories. And so as we go out and share our stories, we should ask ourselves the following questions. Some of you might be asking, who's this Paul guy and how do we get here to Acts 26? Because what's fascinating here is Paul isn't just some guy who was just living an average life or anything like that before he became a Christian. As a matter of fact, Paul before Christianity was somebody who was on a lifelong mission to end it altogether. And as we'll unpack here with his story, we see this fascinating and incredible transformation that happens in his life to where he goes from being somebody who's wanting to end it to somebody who's wanting to build Christianity up to the ends of the earth. So let's look here in verses 1-3. So starting in verse 1. So Paul, gesturing with his hand, started his defense. I am fortunate, King Agrippa, that you are the one hearing my defense today against all these accusations made by Jewish leaders. For I know you are an expert of all Jewish customs and controversies. Now please listen to me patiently. What's amazing here is before we get that template from Paul, Paul gives us two things that we have to consider, understand, and know before we tell our stories. The first thing that we have to know, consider, and remember when it comes to telling our stories is this, is that it is important for us to understand and know your listener. I was recently doing some math not too long ago. It wasn't hard math, but I was doing math nonetheless. And I realized that I've been married now for 6 months. And it has been an adventure, to say the least. And what's funny is before you get married, you get told by other husbands, wives, partners, things like that, that you just learn so much about yourself as well as your partner. And at first I was like, oh, okay, sure. Like I know her, I love her, right? But it's really true. And as a matter of fact, not too long ago, my wife brought something to my attention where apparently if I'm asking her for something that's pretty much a crazy request, I go through this whole act, if you will, of trying to get her to say yes. And so according to her, which was even confirmed later on by some other people, I put my head down, put my hands on my heart, give her a couple puppy eyes, so something like that. Blink, maybe poke my eye, get a tear. And I go something like, Arissa, my dearest wife, I know you love our second room in our apartment as your office, and it's been great. But I was wondering if I could make it into a little man cave where I could put some Rams posters up, my jerseys, and things like that. I think it would be really cool if I did that. Now, in other instances where I do that, I'll try to double down. And the way I double down is I'll give her some more compliments. And I'll even change my voice a little bit just to be a little bit more like just sad and things like that. So for instance, I'll go, Arissa, my dearest wife, I love you. You are so kind. You are so loving. You do so much for me. Is it okay if I talk about you today in my message on Sunday? Now, does that work every time? Not at all. It does not work. But I do this because I know her. And I know that it's probably a 0% chance that I'm going to put those Ram jerseys up on the wall. But if I could get it to even 0.1, the best chance I have of that is just being a little bit more loving and just being more caring and changing my voice. But like I said, does it work? Not at all. And in the same fashion, that's what Paul is sort of doing here. Again, he's not trying to use puppy eyes or, be a little sappy or sad, but he is being strategic. And as you'll see here in this passage, he says things like, I am fortunate that you are hearing me today, or you are an expert. And even later on uses words like please and your majesty and your most excellent. And Paul is speaking in this way because he knows this is what rulers expect to hear. Because he's speaking to a king and a Roman governor. And this king and a Roman governor are expected to hear respectful things. And which in turn will make them to actually listen to his story. And by saying these things, Paul is intentionally creating this environment where listening is more likely to happen rather than just dismissing it altogether. And mind you, Paul isn't trying to be manipulative here, but rather he has and is showing awareness. He knows that to be heard by these rulers and these authoritative figures, he must speak their language of respect. He's showing us, in turn, how to meet people where they are so that they can listen to us as well. And ultimately, when it comes to sharing our story, context and relationships matter. And just like Paul adapts the story here in Acts and throughout different instances throughout the book of Acts, we need to think about how we shape our stories in a way that connects with others. And what I appreciate here with this blessed book is that storytelling and sharing our stories is the final S. Because in order for us to understand context and relationships, we have to build a relationship with other people. In other words, as we tell our stories, you wouldn't tell your story to a skeptical coworker in the same way with somebody who's in your small group. And the reason being is because they're in different stages of life. Different things they will hear different things from each and every one of our stories. And so as we go out and share our stories, we should ask ourselves the following questions. Who am I talking to? What's their background? What matters to them? How can I present my experience in a way that will resonate with their perspective? And this thoughtful approach will help us ensure that our stories are not just told, but they're actually heard. And again, it's not trying to impress anybody with just our background or where we're currently at with life. It's about showing how God has changed us. The beauty of our stories of how we become Christians isn't about past achievements or current life status. It's the way that God has met us into where we were and who we are today.